Hello and welcome to episode 27 of The Legal Scoop. I'm your host, Brendan Shannon, and I'm joined today by my colleague, someone you should all be familiar with, Melanie Daly. Say
Good
hello,
morning.
Melanie. And on The Legal Scoop, we talk about recent wins here at LOMAD, whether it be attorney wins, staff wins, or what have you, and try and talk about how they can help you with your files. So today we've got a really good one with Melanie. My understanding is that you had an occupational disease win where maybe the doctor didn't have the most accurate understanding of the claimant's job duties. Is that correct?
That is correct. We had a home health aide who worked overnights for a client, and it was unclear from the record what kind of disabilities the client had, but it was the doctor's position that the client was up all night and the claimant had to get up and feed her and wash her hair and do her nails, but he wasn't really sure at how often because she worked from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. So reasonably, we could assume that the client was sleeping from,
Yeah.
the majority of that shift, and the doctor wasn't really sure how often. He just kept reiterating a lot, but it was really clear that he really didn't have any knowledge of how often she was actually awake.
That's interesting. So, was this a claim for like the hands or wrist?
Yes, it was bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome, and she indicated that she had been experiencing symptoms for 4 to 6 years. Interestingly, they did provide a medical report from 2020, and it indicated that she's had numbness in her hands for about a month prior to that visit. But that visit date was also 3 days prior to her start date with our employer.
Wow. So, for anyone who's not familiar, as far as date of disability goes with an occupational disease claim, you might think like, oh, there's pre-existing or there's medical, but they try and favor the claimant because they can pick the latest of a range of different dates. But it sounds like here what you were dealing with is a lot of times in occupational disease claims, we would raise the Padawan case, which we've talked about ad nauseum on this program. Where you'd sort of argue that like, oh, the doctor kind of just documented repetitive motions, but didn't provide enough detail about how long or how frequently, or the weights being moved, anything like that. But it sounds like in this case, it's more a matter of he didn't really understand the details of what she was doing. You took a look at it and said, okay, so she's working overnight. How often is she really doing this? So in the doctor's report, was it basically stated that because of, cooking, cleaning, doing hair and nails, she developed carpal tunnel?
Exactly. And we specifically asked him not only how often she was getting up and doing this, but what activities that she was engaged in at work that she isn't already engaged in her own home. If she's already cooking and cleaning at her own home, like most of us do, we were trying to get him to say, how could this be from work-related activity when she does the exact same things at home? And also, interestingly, he did not have an accurate history of her work. He testified that she started having symptoms 4 to 6 years prior. So that would leave us at 2018. And I asked what work activity she was engaged in 2018. And he thought that she was in the same work activity, but she was actually a stay-at-home mom during that time.
Potentially doing some of the same things, right?
Correct.
So that's great. So in this case, was it disallowed by the judge?
Yes, it was disallowed by the judge. And interestingly, claimant's attorney was trying to take a Section 44 route with this claim, indicating that the claimant had a long history of employment using her hands, and we, just by bad luck on our part, happened to be the last exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to take a different route than what I expected and just said, based on her long history, we were the last employer, and we have the recourse of being able to pursue Section 44. So if you establish the claim, it's okay for us because we can, bring on prior employers. But we then argued that Section 44 wouldn't apply to this claim, first of all, because she was not in the same line of work. She was unemployed as a stay-at-home mom for 2 to 3 years prior to our employer. And prior to that, she worked as a clerk. So she wasn't in that same
Wow.
line of work for an extended period of time that would trigger Section 44.
So they tried to raise Section 44 without really any basis.
Yes, I think that he kind of knew that they didn't really have a good claim, and he was basically trying to get, show the
Mhm.
judge that we would still have recourse to be able to bring on all of these other employers, but that just simply wouldn't have been the case.
That's great. So, I mean, I guess just real quick to touch on the Section 44 bit, if anyone watching this isn't familiar with it, basically with an OD claim, if the claimant was in the same line of work leading up to it, the last employer who, the claimant worked for and was doing the same work that allegedly caused the occupational disease, would be on the hook for it, but then they can get apportionment based on the amount of time the claimant worked for prior employers doing the same thing. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, that's a great win, Melanie. And I like how it sort of illustrates that, like I kind of touched on earlier, Catalan isn't always as simple as just saying, oh, well, they just said repetitive job duties or whatever, or they didn't, put the amount of time doing certain things. Sometimes it's just kind of looking at it with, a critical eye and seeing like, wait a minute, okay, so she developed it by doing things that would only be done when someone's awake. Um, and she worked overnights. Like, is it really that credible? And then add to the fact that you were able to think about how she's doing these things at home. That's just a great illustration of how far-reaching the Padawan decision can be, and what a great tool it is for us on the defense side with defending occupational disease claims. So, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
Absolutely. And I know that I think anyone watching this should subscribe below for more of our videos. We've got Melanie's Minutes. We've got Andrew Gold's periodic funny programs. So lots happening here at LOMAD. So keep it tuned here, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.